Now it should be no secret that I have a ton of old D&D books. My Uncle John ended up giving me a lot of them when he downsized from a bigger house to a smaller one. And I am very grateful for all those books. But some of them are a little much to parse through. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present you with the original Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook by Gary Gygax. Now, this one was given to me by my uncle, along with a lot more Dungeons & Dragons books, and he was the original owner. And Dungeons & Dragons was originally released in 1978, and it was so popular that it got a 6th printing by 1980, just 2 years later. And this is basically all that Gary Gygax wanted to put into chainmail, but couldn't exactly fit. And back in the day, it was sold for $15, which is about more than a third of what you buy pen and paper books today. But seeing how this is the progenitor of all pen and paper books, let's give it a first glance. The first thing you're going to notice as we look through all of this is it looks very much like a Word file. There's not a lot of parsing going on. It's really hard to tell chapters apart. Your only clue is basically these headers, and that's it. They tell you what's going on that page, much akin to how books were made just in general. Normal, everyday books, would tell you the author and the chapter you are on. Or like instruction manuals or encyclopedias would tell you what's at the top of the page. Something strange I noticed while glancing through this is it doesn't tell you how to generate ability scores, or if it does, it's within these walls of text, which each one of these columns I would say is about the equivalent of 2.5 normal book pages. So you got 5 pages packed onto one of these on each side. Of course the graphs help break it up and pad out the book itself, but nevertheless, I think what it is it's something referenced in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You'll also notice that there are, well, it basically explains all the mechanics of the stuff right there, where later editions basically made it so your D&D characters' stats were explained in the mechanics section and just like a quick jump through on the Something else I noticed about this is it doesn't explain to you how to make your ability scores. It's something that's specifically referenced for the Dungeon Master's Guide. So Something else I noticed is that it doesn't tell you how to go and roll your ability scores. It's something saved specifically for the Dungeon Master's Guide. I think this is to go and give more power to the Dungeon Master and keep more of the rules in the dark for the players, so players don't know the ins and outs on how to go and abuse the mechanics of the game. All of the ability scores also are presented with the tables of things that they affect. So all your thieving adjustments are actually under the ability score table for dexterity rather than where thieves are. And same can be said about cleric spells. Well, that stuff's pretty basic, actually. Another thing I noticed is the majority of the information presented here is what affects everything of dexterity. Something else I noticed is that everything that has to do with your ability scores are presented in this ability score chapter. So right here we can see here's your thieving ability percentages right under dexterity. But most of this other stuff is pretty basic. None of the ability scores really specifically affect classes as much as dexterity does, except for wisdom, which is just a small little sideline. Where is that? Right here. So wisdom, like adjustments for clerics right here, about their spell levels, and then the general information. So there's always a kind of specific included under each one of these tables to go with the general information. Another thing is that this edition has a lot of minimum and maximum things. So certain races have a maximum strength and a minimum strength. They can only attain certain levels. I don't know if this is really done for any actual balance, but I feel like this edition is way more about maintaining the lore with game mechanics and forcing the player and the Dungeon Master to work around what Gygax's vision was. Something else you Something else you'll no doubt notice while reading through these is that it has a value for male and female, and almost universally females have worse stats than males. Let's see, looks like charisma's intact, constitution, it looks like it's mostly strength. Females are weaker than males in this edition, or at least their max strength is less. Also, there are racial restrictions on what classes you can play as, and I think it's over here. Nope, it's over here. There's a table about what race prefers to hang out with what other race. Alright, let's take a look at here. Let's see what the descriptions are here. Dwarves, hilly mountain regions. For more details, Advanced Monster Manual. Oh, and then the mechanics of what it means for players. Okay. Well, maybe elves will have more of an explanation. Let's see here. They're elves, and there's different types, and you're going to look in the Monster Manual. Gnomes, rocky hills and wooded areas, Monster Manual. Even half-elves are in the Monster Manual. Just, under elf, too. And just, there's no real description for these races. They only really describe humans, and that's because they don't need to describe shit about humans. Humans are just your everyday whatever. We're all human. We all got it. I mean, like some of these drawings give you a very limited view on what these races are and what it means. So, I'm a little disappointed that they keep pointing at other manuals, and this isn't an all-encompassing single thing a player needs to play Dungeons & Dragons effectively. Now, I definitely believe that Dungeons & Dragons forces the lore into the mechanics, and that you really have to go and play by the books. A lot of the restrictions are due to roleplay and what the character can and can't do within the game, rather than letting the dungeon master have more freedom with it. For example, paladins always have to be lawful good, no exceptions. No dark paladins, no neutral paladins, nothing of the sort. So this is a really big hamper on... Now I've noticed that this game really forces the lore in the mechanics. There's no such thing as like a lawful evil paladin or even a lawful neutral. It has to be lawful good under a specific order with a very strict set of stats, and it has to be human. This is very restricting, and of course you can ignore the rules, but the rules are in there to go and enforce a vision. I personally am not one who strictly adheres to the rules, but in a game like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, everything is hanging by so many different threads that if you cut a few of them, you might just unhinge the entire game. However, not all of that is bad. I mean, check this out. You got titles. Titles are awesome. Although you do notice that there's no established maximum level yet. And you're just an initiate for like the first 11 levels until you kill another druid, if you're a druid. But level titles, I think, are wonderful, even though they were cut in all later editions. Just, it's something to go and make you feel like you're progressing. It's something other people can call you. I mean, some people are like, oh, you're the Dragonborn, or, you know, you're the Chosen One, or you're the Source Hunters, all that kind of stuff. Well, I feel like this really adds to all of that, giving you a sense that you matter in some way. Although I think it's really weird that you're just like going through every single one of the circles of magic as you level up. Like, only level 10 wizards and necromancers. So anytime you reference a necromancer, it's a level 10 wizard. And yeah, I really like it. I really like it a lot. Something else I found is interesting are the two classes cut out of 2nd edition, the assassin and the monk. The assassin's basically your throwaway dirt character. Like, no one loves him and he had to go and join some sort of assassin order. And I think he's actually really awesome. I mean, look, it has how much gold you get paid for assassin targets. So if you had to go kill some, like, fucking commoner, you get 50 gold if you're level 1. If you want like a level 15 guy to go kill a level 0 dude, it costs 10,000 gold. So I think that was a cool mechanic that they added in there. I just think that's awesome. Now, something else I've noticed in these early editions is that there's almost zero customization. Even when you go and you choose your race and your class, it's limited by your ability scores, which are determined by your dungeon master. And in the DMG, it doesn't have the typical way that we roll. I mean, most players go with the 4d6 minus the lowest. You know, you have the 3 highest on there. Other DMs make it so you roll 7 sets of that. 7 rolls, and then you drop off the lowest. Other ones make it so you roll 2 tables, and then you pick the one with the best stats. None of those are really mentioned in that edition. They're mostly, well, we'll cover it when we get to the DMG, but I feel that it's very restricting, the way you can't really customize anything, and that your ability scores determine what kind of character you are. On the other hand, it's really good to force people to roleplay. So if you suck at role-playing and you can't choose how to make a character, this is it. Monks, man. Holy shit, monks. This class was removed for a reason. It's because it's the most overpowered class ever. And I think the only thing that really hampers it is the fact that it's got like crappy hit points and a high experience gain. Also, it's got a lot of roleplay limitations on it. But basically, man, I mean, you can go and speak with animals at 3rd level. You get fucking psychic powers going on with resistances, resistance against diseases, and as it just keeps going on, I mean, he eventually gets immune to surprise, and his hands become more lethal than all the other stupid-ass weapons. He gets thief abilities, and he also gets spell immunity with his AC bonuses. So stuff gets intense in this. Now, no doubt while you're also glancing over this, you're seeing that the only way to go and tell anything apart is if it's bold or if it's slightly bigger than everything else. There's no real easy organization. But like I said before, because this is the progenitor, I'm sure it's laying the path. I mean, look, we got alternating colors for ease of reading. I don't know if that's revolutionary back then, but I think it's pretty sweet now. For this book, being so thick and heavy with things to know and read, it's very hard to navigate. You literally have to go and tab all the pages of things that you want to know, using sticky notes. But seeing how this is the progenitor, we can go ahead and ignore that. Now, something I really want to cover is the book's content. Now, the first 40 pages cover character creation. The next 60 pages cover spells. Just like all the way to page 100 is spells. After that, it gives you 10 pages on the mechanics of how the game works, with very little on, well, I guess it's very thick, but just the ratio of it. The fact that basically half of this book is spells. Leaves a lot to be desired, and this is probably why they had so many revisions and supplements added in, especially using Dragon Magazine. Something else I wanted to hurry and touch on is this book includes psionics, and I think that's just because it's a core part of what monks have to deal with. And this also has the first prestige class in Dungeons & Dragons, the Bard, with a lot of requirements. The Bard has to go and have 15 strength, wisdom, dexterity, and charisma, and at least a 12 in The Bard has to have a 15 in strength, wisdom, and dexterity, and charisma, and at least a 12 in intelligence and constitution. It's got to be human or half-elf, and it begins play as a fighter. When it reaches 5th level, it can then switch over to a rogue, and I stopped reading at that point because I was thinking this is a lot of work, and I don't want to learn how multi-classing works in this, and what happens when you become a Bard. But Bards are basically your super badass, can do anything. And the final few pages are just cool little schematics on, hey, look, here's how alignment looks. You want to know how the planes are aligned? They're aligned like this. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And finally, there's your reference sheet with easy to photocopy tables. But sadly, no appendix. So while I have no experience playing first edition, having started on second, the first edition player's handbook doesn't really add much to the overall Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game unless you wanted to go incorporate more restrictions, or if you wanted to go and have those added, really broken classes. Overall, I think it's a pass if you already play second edition. I think it covers not a lot of territory. And I think the second edition hammered out way more, especially with the proficiency system, really expanding what your characters can and can't do. However, all this being said, I think that the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide rocks.